Insidious 5 is finally upon us, or Insidious the Red Door, and I have been just the most hyped for this, and I think I've been the only one. No one's really talking about this, no one really cares that much. I know it's still early, maybe the buzz is gonna set in, word of mouth is gonna go around or something like that, I don't know. But there hasn't been that much hype in the build up, but I just gotta say, like, I saw it tonight and I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. Now, I do have some caveats with that. I do have some issues with this movie. I'll get to those soon, but overall, I will say that as a big fan of the Insidious franchise, I think that Insidious 5, The Red Door, is a pretty successful successor. It's nice to come back to the Lambert family and with Dalton and Josh in particular and explore their relationship a little bit more nearly 10 years later since the ending of Insidious 2 and where we left them from there. That being said, it very much makes Insidious 3 and 4 feel like they are just completely spin-off movies. Those are the Elise Chronicles officially now, and now we can kind of look at the official canon movies as Insidious 1, 2 and 5. But that's just kind of my headcanon there. I don't know, maybe other people don't feel that way. Anyway, but when it comes to this film, I will say that during the first half, I was kind of underwhelmed. I was kind of like, damn, after all this, like, this is it? It was kind of irking me because I felt like I wasn't liking all the choices. This movie is very heavy on the college setting where Dalton is now that he is of that age. And so because of that, it has kind of a comedic flair throughout some of it, which I don't really love in an Insidious film, I suppose. I like it to be horrific and campy and stuff, more so than like teenage comedy stuff, if you know what I mean. It's not too heavy on that, but there is that aspect to it, which isn't exactly what I was looking for, but that's fine. I mean, you know, it's a different flavor. And that's something to appreciate about this movie. It is going for something a little bit different. It does feel like it is the new sort of era for the Insidious franchise, I suppose, and I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. What I do think is kind of a bad thing when it comes to this movie is that it sort of contradicts itself in terms of not being sure whether it's for old audiences that love the older films or for newer audiences trying to make bank off of like an IP. Because a lot of this film, especially during that first half where it was starting to lose me, is very much about retreading old ground that we already know from the previous films. It's explaining what the astral projection, out-of-body experiences stuff is. It's explaining what the demons are, how they work, the entities within the further and all that sort of stuff. It's explaining the things that we as fans already know about. And so because of that, it feels a little bit like, well, I already know this stuff. Like, why am I watching a film relearning everything that I already know? Because it really takes its time introducing a lot of these elements yet again. And for newcomers, I guess that's necessary, and I guess maybe it's a good thing. But for, you know, for old fans who are returning to this legacy franchise, it feels a bit like a waste of time, especially when, you know, you go in excited to see this film and then a lot of it's explaining things that we already know. It kind of irked me, just kind of annoyed me in that sort of way. But I also feel like the film sort of contradicts itself in that despite doing all of this re-explaining, it also sort of expects you to know quite a lot about the previous films, especially Insidious 2. You really have to know your Insidious 2 plot to kind of follow through with this movie, which was absolutely fine for me. I've seen all of the Insidious films numerous times. I'm a huge fan of them, absolutely love them, so you know, I had no trouble following along, but even me, I'm like, hang on, wait, what order did that happen in 2? I don't remember. How did this happen and whatever? And look, I'm kind of exaggerating this. It's not that big of a problem. It's not that complex of a story, but it is just something that I thought was worth mentioning. Something else that I think is worth mentioning though is that, of course, this is an Insidious film and it has fun, spooky scenes, right? Like there are some really awesome scenes involving tension and stuff, like where there's some sort of obscured entity in the background that we can't quite figure out who's behind one of the characters, and the character doesn't know that entity is there yet, and it's slowly approaching, and it's like, whoa, what the fuck is about to happen? Little moments like that and gimmicks like a scene set within an MRI machine, which is sure to get a bunch of people's phobias right out of there. Like, I just feel like there are a lot of good little gimmicky scenes like these that do end with a jump scare, but build up the tension well, that I very much enjoyed, and it got the audience in my cinema like nervously giggling the entire time, like, oh my god, what the hell's about to happen, all that stuff. And that, of course, makes it a bit more fun, and it makes it sort of immersive when you are seeing this with a full audience, which I actually did do tonight, which I was kind of surprised by, because as I said, not a lot lot of people are talking about this film. I think that it's sort of dead on arrival. I think not a lot of people are talking about it. I kind of think that this movie's gonna flop, and I do think that that's unfortunate. Even though I've been saying mostly negative so far, I will say that I think Insidious 5 does bring the soul, the heart back from the original two Insidious films. The fact that we're spending time again with Patrick Wilson's Josh Lambert and Ty Simpkins' Dalton is just, there's something special about it and nostalgic about it. And even when some of the entities like that we know from previous films, like the red-faced demon who appears here and haunts Dalton once again as he did in his childhood, it's kind of nostalgic. Look, there's a lot of sort of sequels like this that come out like way after the fact, after the original, and just bank on all the nostalgia. You know, it's memory berries and it's sort of cynical and stuff, and a lot of people have issues with these sorts of films, and a lot of people just absolutely love them and they can't really see past their love for the IP. I think maybe I fall more into the latter, at least when it comes to Insidious, because I sort of fell for it every time. You know, once they're playing Tiptoe Through the Tulips, once they're kind of exploring familiar grounds like within the Further and stuff, the fog machine comes out, we're seeing Patrick Wilson with a lantern walking through the dark and everything. Once we're seeing this stuff again, especially during the second half, I'm just falling in love once again, because it's just so special to me. And it's like not even scary at that point. It just feels like the old gang's back together and we're doing another Insidious adventure, and it feels kind of fun to me for that reason. But Insidious 5 as a whole is not that scary, I would say, but it's more like intriguing in terms of the plot. The thing about this movie is that it definitely leans into what it sort of was trying to tell within the first two Insidious films as well, where it's about a father and a son. Like, that is essentially what this film is about. It is a family drama, but, and I've said this before about these Insidious films, it's a family drama that is, albeit a lot more scary than a typical film that deals with that sort of topic. And I think that that is something that the Insidious franchise as a whole kind of excels at. And I do think that Insidious 5 here brought that sort of legacy and did respect what came before it as well, because it does show some things that we saw in the past in slightly different contexts and all that sort of stuff, which is sort of like exciting to see as a fan. But yeah, that's sort of where I'm stuck here though, where I'm not quite sure if this movie was fully for the fans or fully for newcomers, and I guess it kind of went halfway with both, and I think it might leave, you know, both parties a little bit missing something. I don't know though. I don't know if that's going to be the popular opinion. Like, there aren't that many takes out on this film just yet. It's very early on, so yeah, I don't know. I don't know if everyone's going to look at this and think, hey, look at this dumbass. He liked it, but he feels conflicted about it and stuff. I don't know. I don't know if everyone's just going to think this is trash and it's just jump scare bullshit and no one cares, or if some people are going to absolutely love it and think I'm dumb for having any criticisms. Probably both will be the case, because it's the internet and everything's either the best or the worst, and that's the only possibility, right? No, but it was really nice seeing Patrick Wilson's character come back, and this time with him directing the film, it did feel a little bit more, I don't know, close to heart. It felt a little bit more special. It felt personal in that sort of way. And I like that it explored the kind of familial topic of, you know, essentially passing down your worst elements, basically. Of course, in this film, it's literally, you know, passing down like haunted curses and whatnot. But in real life, you know, it's more like passing down a bad habit or something like that. And I do find that sort of aspect a little bit interesting, I guess. I don't know. Insidious 5 to me was a pretty fun time. I liked it, but it did leave me like wanting a little bit more. I thought that it was gonna be like my favorite movie of the year, and look, it'll probably make my top 10. I will say that. Like, there's something about returning to the Insidious franchise that just feels special, and I kind of loved it for that reason. But I will say that I don't think it's a complete masterpiece. I do think it wastes a bit of time retreading old information, and I don't love all of the choices it makes. Another thing that sort of bothered me about this movie is just an inherent thing about it being a sequel to begin with, because where Insidious 2 left us off, it was like this happy ending. It was like this perfect loop where it was their story done. And I was kind of like annoyed when they sort of changed the status quo come this film, where like things weren't quite the same and they kind of changed the family dynamics up a little bit. I wasn't a huge fan of this choice at first. I was like, this feels different. This isn't the same. Like, I wanted everything to just be like, have their happy ending. But now we're kind of bringing everything up to fuck with their lives again. And I know they're fictional characters, but it's like, I don't want to see them in trouble again. Oh no. But once they kind of do explore these topics and explore what has happened since Insidious 2, it actually makes me really appreciate it. Like, the fact that at the end of Insidious 2, they all sort of decide to make Dalton and Josh forget about everything that happened. They literally forget the past past here that has happened, and this is a big element to Insidious 5, where they don't really remember the hauntings at all. They don't remember the occurrences between Insidious 1 and 2, and so in this film, it's very much about dredging up their past, and it's very much about dealing with this trauma that has been entirely suppressed. And it's sort of about the dangers of that and how we should remember even the bad times, because they can be important to us. They can kind of make us who we are. And I did find that element really interesting, and it really turned itself around for me here, because at first I was like, I don't love all the choices, but then it sort of made me love all the choices in the end. Like, it even turned the things I didn't like into kind of more positives than I was thinking as the movie went on. I do think the second half is much stronger, but it does lean into the nostalgia a lot more during that second half as well, so maybe that says something about me. And I also appreciate something about this movie in that it is very artist focused, I guess. Dalton is going to college for an art degree or something like that. Basically, he draws things, as he did in the original film, where it kind of showed he had that astral projection ability where he's seen things and he was drawing the entities and stuff. In this, he kind of has kept up with that habit and he keeps drawing things. And this is sort of how he enters back into this world of the further and accidentally draws things from his past back into reality and back into dangerous territory. I think that that's sort of a cool thing. I think Insidious 5 deals with a lot of kind of cool stuff, I suppose, that I appreciate in terms of it being very relevant to the films that came before it. This isn't a completely new film that just ignores everything, you know? But it does feel like it's going for something slightly different. But I will also say that the jump scares and all that sort of stuff is probably going to bother a bunch of people. This movie probably won't work for a bunch of people, supernatural horror movies and stuff. It's, you know, wildly popular in some ways, but it's also very much strongly hated by a lot of cinephiles as well. So I guess if you already like the Insidious movies, you'll probably like 5, but if you don't, you probably won't. I don't think 5 is going to be the one to kind of bring you into the whole paranormal horror franchise, you know, or genre, as it were. Basically, it's an Insidious movie. I'd say that it's probably better than Insidious 3 and 4, which, as I said, are essentially spin-offs, but I wouldn't say that it's anywhere near as good as the original first 2 Insidious films, which in my eyes are actual masterpieces. I would say 5 is just a pretty good film that I'm glad exists, so I'll watch it when I rewatch the franchise, you know, when I do. But I don't know, it probably wasn't like super necessary, but it was nice to spend time with these characters again, even if it was horrific for them. and there was some creative scenes in here that I really enjoyed, jump scare scenes and that sort of stuff, you know. I like that kind of stuff, you know. Sue me. I don't know, it's a horror movie, what do you want? I thought that it did do some of that stuff pretty effectively, but overall, I wouldn't say that this film is going to keep me up at night. I wouldn't say that anything really has stuck in my mind too much where I'm like, oh, that was really creepy. But I don't know, ask my audience though, because if you were to believe the sounds that were coming out of people's mouths, the gasps, the screams and stuff, apparently this movie was absolutely terrifying. So I guess it works for some people and that's kind of cool, but it did feel a bit like some of the people in my cinema, it was like the first horror movie they'd ever seen in their lives or something. Which could have been, because the first Insidious was the first horror movie that I ever saw in cinemas. So who am I to shit on these people, you know? Anyway, I guess that's about all that I have to say. I do have kind of mixed feelings, but I lean to positive. I like this movie quite a lot, and I guess, yeah, that's about all I have to say. So, if you're still watching, thank you. Please do the things before you go, which are like, comment, share, subscribe, all that shit. I'm Maddie. Goodbye.